Welcome to a series of chats, podcasts featuring the designs, experiences, stories about cruising, business, and lots of other subjects that are all to do with Dashew Offshore, Steve and Linda Dashew. We thought it would be fun, Steve and I, to spend some time going through some of the milestones, and we're going to dash backwards and forwards in time. And these books will be called the Dashew Talking Books. They will come in chapters and they will be available for you to enjoy, we hope.
Yes, it sounds like it'd be fun. There's not many things I would enjoy more than to talk about boats.
There's going to be no schedule, and we're going to put these podcasts, these chapters out as and when we think of them, and I hope that you will join us. So today I'm with Steve Dashew, and we're going to talk about Windhorse and finding heavy weather for her. FPB 83 Windhorse, the genesis of the FPB fleet. So Steve, why did you need to find heavy weather?
Well, when we started thinking about doing I hate to say the word powerboat, an anathema to any good sailor, still is to me. We knew that the bottom line was how they would how comfortable they would be at sea, and how they'd handle heavy weather. And having done all the research for our book, Surviving the Storm, and all of our sailing designs, et cetera, over the years, we'd never seen a powerboat that we would want to be in heavy weather in. It's just, and we'd interviewed a few owners of powerboats in various ports around the world, and it was sort of, when they made a passage, they did it with great fear and trembling, and it was very uncomfortable. And we just never could get our heads around the concept. Why would anybody do that? We ran into a bit of an anomaly bringing Beowulf back from the East Coast.
So this was the last of the mighty sailing boats from Dashew, Beowulf.
Yeah, and she was a 78-foot water ballasted Ketchum, a real mom-and-pop cruiser that she was quick enough she could build apparent wind. She could build the strength of her apparent wind faster than she built drag, up to about 18 knots. So we considered 300 miles a day kind of a nominal day in the trades. And we knew when we started thinking about powerboats, we would never equal her performance downwind.
So what made you decide that finally it was going to be a motorboat?
Well, we had actually designed it. Our normal pattern was we'd put a new boat in the water, and once we got it wrung out, we were just cruising, I would start thinking about the next boat, and then it would start chiming in what we would change, et cetera. And by the time we had put a couple years on Beowulf, we had another boat design ready to go. It would have been a little quicker, and maybe she would have. It took 17 to 18 knots to average 305 miles a day with her in the trades. We thought we could push that down to 14 knots true, which is a big difference in sea state. Mm-hmm. So we had completed that work, but weren't anxious for the 3 to 4 years of hard labor that takes to design a boat, build it, and sea trial it, at a minimum of 3.5 years. And we were getting on.
So you thought you'd do something really, really simple and do a motorboat, which you'd never done before.
Well, we weren't really even. We went through the cycle. We thought briefly about our motorboats, and this is crazy. Our sailboats are faster under power, and they're way more comfortable, and they have much better range. So why would you switch? And then we were bringing Beowulf back from the East Coast, coming up from Panama, and we had a beautiful, very unusual southerly coming up the southern part of Mexico. And late in the afternoon, we were off Acapulco, and we started getting some strange, occasional bands of rain. And they weren't actually banded rain squalls like you would see in a hurricane, but the weather was just a little weird. And NOAA wasn't forecasting anything. The guides that we were using for routing weren't forecasting anything. We could smell something was up. And in the process of running, we were running downwind under main only, having dropped the jib, and it's blowing about 30 knots now, and so she's very comfortable, and we were cruising on 14, 15 knots, kind of a seat sea, and pretty soon on the radar we start seeing these lines of bands of squalls and coming and going, and the barometer was just very slowly dropping. Breeze was stable. So we knew we had something forming out to the west. Nothing on the radio on NOAA. And the National Hurricane Center wasn't saying anything. So we had Sarah trying to find cloud top temperatures for us off the internet. Anyway, about halfway into that afternoon, we had a wind shift, and the autopilot was driving, and for some reason the boat went way by the lee, and she jibed. And that's a 1,000 square foot mainsail.
Wow!
It weighed 200 kilos and a big heavy boom, and the boom broke right at where the sheet strap went over it.
So this is your mom and pop cruising boat.
A mom and pop cruising boat in 35 knots of breeze. So it was very difficult to get. We had to get the sail down because there's two jagged pieces of the boom that are the only thing. The clew was attached with its strap, and this 2 or 3 meter foot piece of boom is hanging down, held only by the internal reef lines, and we had to get down on deck. And it was sort of Linda had to steer the boat up into the breeze feather, and I said, Linda, pay attention, because if we do this wrong, I'm dead. And I just wanted her to pay attention. She didn't appreciate the joke. Anyway, she did well on the helm, and we got the sail down, which is sort of miraculous, and got it secured on deck and proceeded under power. And we called in at Los Hadas, which is a port we hadn't visited in a while, and got on the dock and spent 3 or 4 days there and cleaned the boat up and then brought her home. And it was dead on the nose the rest of the way. We just powered straight uphill. Never even took the cover off the mizzen. So that's when we started seriously thinking, because if we sold Beowulf, we'd be in our early 60s by the time we got a new boat in the water. And we started to think if we wanted to cruise by ourselves without crew, then we sort of had to come up with a powerboat idea.
Yeah. So I mean, then we've talked about Beowulf and the sort of thinking about Windhorse and the development of Windhorse, and then Windhorse is in the water, and you're looking for heavy weather. Why is that? Where are you? Where is the boat?
First I should give you a little background on what happened through the design process. So we had done some very preliminary work, and we thought, well, we should take a look at this. I did not understand the logic of trawlers. They looked heavy, they looked slow, they looked dangerous. They didn't have good range of stability. If you got in a broaching situation, it was like a death cry, because you'd roll over and that was it, you wouldn't come back. We were used to boats that would recover from a capsize. So as we got into it, the more I studied them and looked at the designs and talked to experts, and we had several friends who were sort of at the top of the species, so to speak, and a couple editors at magazines were very experienced that gave us their thoughts. And I just didn't understand the concept, so we said, well, here's what we knew when we started out. We knew if we took any one of our sailboats, would power better than any trawler, had better range under power, generally speaking, without allowing for the sails, and was much more comfortable in almost all conditions. But you had to handle the sails. So then we said, well, what if we take the sails off? What if we get rid of the rigging, get rid of the windage, get rid of the weight, get rid of the mass of all the lead that's required, and get rid of a lot of the form stability in the hull, since we don't have to carry sails. And all of a sudden we have this beautiful, fine, balanced hull line that would go uphill like crazy with very little pitching motion, and even more efficient and more comfortable. So it just seemed like it made a lot of sense. Now, a lot of our ratios were considerably different than would be normal in a powerboat, and that was because that's what we were used to in our sailboats. We knew they worked because we've been doing it for years. So we took what we had, because we're talking, it's a big project, a lot of money. We ran it we have several very talented naval architect friends. They all said, we're nuts, you can't do this, you can't do that. And we showed it to some of our experienced friends. They said, geez, we'd love to have a boat like that, but we don't think it'll work. And the concern that I had was that there are often rules in disciplines like naval architecture that are established based on history. And people may have forgotten. They know the rules, they forgot why.
Yeah.
And what I was wondering is there some reason that these boats are built this way that I'm not seeing? And we went over and over and over, and it was a huge gamble for us, especially with everybody saying we were nuts. I mean, 3 years of our lives or 4 years of our lives, and and a huge amount of money, and we really wouldn't know the answer to if we made it, if the boat was going to suit us or not, until we'd been offshore in some heavy weather. And we put the boat in the water. She was almost exactly on her numbers, under power, which we were used to. There was some difference in fuel burn, which we corrected later with a new set.
And this was in New Zealand, wasn't it? You built in New Zealand?
In New Zealand, right. Yeah, in New Zealand. And we knew that we were onto something when we started having the ferry boat. So New Zealand has lots of like bus transits between their islands and villages. They have all these ferry boat drivers, and they're all keen yachtsmen. They're observers of what's going on. They kept circling the boat, occasionally coming down to the marina and asking questions about it. So we knew we were catching their eye, and then we started to catch the eye of the commercial fishing guys. And one night we were going uphill to the Bay of Islands in a bit of, about, 4, 6, 7, and maybe a couple meters of sea, and we just slicing through the waves and not making any fuss, doing 11 knots. And we went between a couple of trawlers with their trawl nets, and between their lights, and talked to them on the radio and cleared. And they were sitting there working in the sea state. They'd never seen anything go through the water like we were. They didn't say anything at the time, but in the morning we were just getting up and I was putting the flag out, and here come these two trawlers, and they circled the boat for about 10 minutes, just looking.
Seriously?
Yes, just looking, and they were looking at the bare hull, but they had seen her working at sea. So when you start attracting the attention of the of the professionals, in a country like New Zealand, you're onto something.
Yeah.
So we had a series of good blows up to 55 knots. In fact, that was with our friend Jim Schmidt, who had one of our boats for 30-some years, with our first client. And Jimmy always brought some breeze with him, and we had 55 knots when he was on board, but the seas were always from one direction. And what we know from a lot of years of experience is that the seas from one direction aren't what get you in trouble or make you uncomfortable. It's when you get a crossing sea state, or sometimes 2 or 3 seas crossing. So we waited in the Bay of Islands for a typical, let's see what time it was. It was fall. No, it was coming on to summertime. So it was late spring, equinoctial gale, and got a good one, and it was blowing. We left out just before the front passed. So the breeze went around from the southwest from the southwest back to the northwest, and we left with a kind of a northeast breeze behind us.
So you had a really confused sea state.
Well, they were the dominant wind wave that we were surfing, and then there was a crossing sea state at right angles.
Wow!
And plus 2 other sets of swells, and we never actually saw one up close, like against the hull side. But we have lots of photographs of maybe 10, 12, 14 meter seas occasionally breaking around us, and it was like the first time that we saw a black squall, and it's pissing down rain, and the breeze is blowing the water flat, and you get this shot of adrenaline, and you think, we got enough sail down, but wait a minute, there is no sail down.
No.
And we just powered through it, and that's when I had never realized up to that point how stressful it was with the way we sailed Beowulf, because if we were in the trades and the weather was stable, we carried 2 spinnakers at night. So that was 6,000 square feet of sail combined. Yeah. And Linda had the back 4,000, back 2,000. I had the forward 4,000. And we enjoyed pushing the boat as a team, the two of us. But it was stressful. I guess it was more stressful for Linda than it was for me. And there was, of course, a big jolt of adrenaline that came with that. But it was the most astonishing feeling when we went through that first squall. And we realized, wait, there's nothing to do. So when we were designing the boat, the thing that I had the hardest time getting my head around was the fact that we were going to go slower on our passages. We knew this would be the case than we did on Beowulf on the downwind passages, because the boat was capable, Windhorse was capable of averaging 300 miles a day, but the fuel burn was too high. He just wasn't going to pay that price. But over I don't know how many thousand miles we put on her, 50 or 60,000 miles, I think our average speed was right around 11 and a quarter knots or something. And every time we say we're going to slow down to save some fuel, we always could creep back up to that 11 and a quarter boat speed. And that was the combination of money going out and time saving, and it seemed quite worthwhile. But it was slower than we would expect on Beowulf.
But the reality is that, you know, the fuel was less expensive than the spinnakers.
Oh, the astonishing thing was our sailboats were a business, and we kept very tight rein on the expenses. We got really good deals on we bought anything we bought except for fuel. We got big discounts, including the sales. And it was, I forgot the exact numbers now, but I think Beowulf was somewhere around $3 in change per mile, nautical mile, for that includes that sailcloth, sail covers, running rigging, standing rigging, pulling the spars every other year and checking everything out. It's which is actually, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not a great deal in terms of what most people spend. Windhorse with fuel, I think was averaging about $3.50 US dollars per US gallon. I think our cost was right at about half or a hair more than half.
And of course, the other thing about the FPB, which of course is common to all your designs, is that quite a lot of the or a significant cost and hassle is exterior bright work, fairing, varnish work, and all of that with Windhorse. One of the things I loved about her was the checker plate decks, and she's just so easy to keep, so easy to make.
And the other thing is to fight the battle of keeping everything simple, and don't ever give up space around your systems for anything, because that if you have good access, then you can check things, and you catch little problems. If you don't have good access, you don't check things. Little problems become big problems, and then they become a big hassle, and maybe a safety issue.
Yeah.
Well, and you know better than anybody. You saw how much work we put in the boat to get it ready when we would come in, and how big a work list you had.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely nothing, and you know, I've said it before, and people would be bored with me saying it. You know, when you rang up and said, right, we're coming because Windhorse was overwintering at Burton in the UK. Okay, Sue, well, we're going to come back, and we'd like you to launch the boat on Wednesday and we'll be leaving on Thursday afternoon. And I said, what? No, it's a week, you know, you'll be here for a week. And sure enough, at 4:00 on the Thursday afternoon, I was just standing on the hammerhead watching you drop the lines and go. I mean, just no fuss. So coming back on this, after you'd done the weather test, what did that make you think? Did you think, actually, this concept, it's got legs, we're going to do more? Because you said earlier that every time you started cruising on a boat, you were thinking about the next one. And the 64 is what came next in terms of design.
We didn't when we built Windhorse. We thought that was the last boat. We were not at all interested in getting back in the boat business. I'm a hands-on type of guy, and we've never had a situation where we had somebody that did everything the way we wanted it. Unless it's just much easier for us to be there and say, do it this way, and that's what we want. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you could have 5 experts around the table on any one of 1,000 different details on the boat, and you're going to get 5 different opinions. And the one I want is mine. So, and we didn't want to go through that on another series of boats, at least at that point. And in order for me to proceed with another design, I had to be comfortable. I knew what was going on, and I mean, we understood the hydrostatics perfectly. And when we put Windhorse in the water, because of all these question marks about motion, that was our concern was, would it be as comfortable as we had hoped? We allowed for.
I mean, were you afraid she was going to slam? What were you concerned about on the motion?
Well, just the vertical and the transverse motion of how a boat that theoretically that light goes through the water, and what the waves do to it in terms of the accelerations. So, you know, we were living almost in the middle of the boat, right near the pitch and roll centers. Mm-hmm. We were very low relative to that height, and so the apparent motion was going to be minimized, whatever it was. We didn't really know, and we did a fair amount of early CFD work to look at various issues, and there were some things that were indicated and some things that weren't. So we had a little bit of insurance, but you really don't know until you get the boat in the water in a confused sea state. And I wasn't prepared to even think about another design until I understood what made her work so well, because the one thing we found out very quickly is the motion was incredibly good in the sea states we'd seen. It was so good that it made me mistrustful. I thought, maybe I'm misinterpreting this. But when some of our very experienced friends were stunned by how comfortable she was, and a couple of the magazine guys that flew out to see her, everybody had the same reaction, especially uphill. They just couldn't believe it. And so we started to think, well, maybe this is real. But it wasn't really until we had the boat in California, which was almost an entire, 6,000, almost 7,000 nautical miles, almost all of which was uphill, that we really began to understand what was going on, and how to go from there. And although I've been involved with CFD and velocity prediction, computer analysis of boats since the 1950s, mid 50s. A friend of mine, Norm Risa, was one of the top guys at Jet Propulsion Laboratories in the olden days, and he designed the hypersonic wind tunnels and solar simulators and stuff for them. And he had a personal account on the JPL mainframe, and on weekends and evenings when the computer wasn't busy, the guys like at his level could run their own stuff. So Norm had developed a velocity prediction program, and which we use to design a Beowulf 6, our last catamaran. And it was a complete parametric design before people knew there were such a thing. Loaded his code and punch cards, and we got this tractor-fed printout, and which I still have, which we designed to develop the hull shape, the dagger boards and rudders, and everything was done on the cowl frame and mainframe. And then so we kind of early on the game with that stuff, and then we were George Hazen and Bruce Hayes, who were the guys that did Orca 3D. That was it's been considered the premier velocity prediction and design software for it's used by the Navy and big yards and stuff all over the world now. But we were their second customer, or
really?
Well, it's debatable. We and Bruce Farr were their first two customers, and so we go way back in that stuff. But with all the numbers, and I have notebooks full of data and all that stuff. At the end, when I make the decisions on the hundreds of little details that go into the hull shape that you trade off, there's a TV that plays between my ears, and I see the boat, I feel the boat going through the water, and that's how I make the decisions. I have the technical data as a backstop, and to play what if games with, but the final decisions are always made by feel.
So is that true for all design, do you think, that people do tank test and this and this and this? The reality is that you get the boat in the water and then you know.
Well, the problem is it's so difficult when you have trying to model something at sea. Smooth water modeling is one thing that's relatively simple, and even one set of waves is simple. But when you have a chaotic sea state where you've got 2 or 3 or 4 sets of waves crossing, there are some ways of modeling that, but none of them are very accurate, and at least nothing that we're aware of at the yacht level or were at that time. And so you have to, it's like, how many seas do you have like this? How many do you have like that? Like, for example, take when we brought the boat back from Hawaii. So normally the trip from Hawaii back to the mainland for us would be a piece of cake. You're going at the end of the summer or early fall. The Pacific High is dropped from its summertime position up near the center, near the Canadian border. It drops down to more like off Southern California, and you go a day north of the Hawaiian Islands, head north, get even with the center of the high, turn right, power a sail to it, and then come out through the east side, and then you surf down from there back to Southern California. It should have been a dream trip, but when we left, we had a wedding we were going to, and which was the whole reason to get back to California. It was so much easier to take the boat than to find a place to stay and for the boat and for a place for ourselves in California and get tickets and well, hell, it's only 2,000 miles. Let's just go. So, but what we didn't bargain for is we had northeast trades and a crossing northwest swell at right angles for 8 to 9 days coming back. Wow. And there was simply no speed, no angle. There was nothing we could do other than move to some other part of the ocean that would avoid getting banged occasionally. And if this would have been at the beginning of the passage, the beginning when we had the boat in the water, we would have thought, well, this is a piece of cake. No, it's not nearly as bad as with the Christmas trades coming up from Panama going to like Grenada, which is really bad. This was not that bad, but it was. We had gotten soft. We had forgotten what it was like to go uphill in really bad conditions, and so getting soft, we were sort of complaining to each other, and we'll get this over with. And when finally we said, well, we either heave to and wait, which we weren't going to do, or let's just put the hammer down and we'll just get it over with.
Just push on.
So we didn't take the waves at an angle. We didn't slow down. We just went blasted right through everything, and that's when all these things come into play, because your body gets tired, and you get tired. You make mistakes if it's associated with heavy weather. You make bad decisions. It becomes, and it happens once or twice, and often people just don't want to go to sea again. So it's getting the boat to where she knows how to, where she can deal with that sort of stuff, and your system's set up so they can deal with it, is a critical part of this process for us, because people may think we're these hoary, bearded professional sailors. We're really kind of pansies. We like being dry. We like being comfortable, and we don't like being knocked around. So, which is why we designed the boats the way we do.
Which is entirely reasonable. And can I just ask you, Steve? You said that when you did the design process, that all those myriad of design decisions you're making using the program and all that kind of stuff, you actually feel the boat. When you were designing Windhorse, did you like her?
I was very intrigued with it. The problem that I had with it is that, and I had that with all of our FPBs the day I sold them, is that I grew up hating powerboats and what they stood for, because if you must have the same problem in the UK. When you start as a kid sailing dinghies, and you're in a race or something, you're crossing a narrow spot in a race course, and there's a powerboat, and he's a half a kilometer away, and he can slow down a touch and let you pass in front, or he can speed up. What are they going to do? 999 of 1,000 times they're going to speed up, and there'd be big massive wake, and that's what I grew up with. And then if you're in a beautiful pristine anchorage somewhere, you and one or two other boats, and there's lots of room for everybody else, a powerboat will come in, run its generators all night long and smoke cigars, and they'll anchor. When they come to rest on their anchor, their stern is sitting over almost on your bow, and there's all kinds of places it's inevitable. So we hated powerboats, and we felt in general that people that drove them were subhuman. So that's where the FPB came about.
Not generalising at all, of course.
No, not generalising, but that was my experience. I couldn't believe I was working on a fucking powerboat. I kept saying that's why I could not. I couldn't. That's the thing I couldn't get through my head, but that's a lifelong habit and I still feel that way about them. But anyway, what can I say?
But the reality is, there are people who have powerboats who don't speed up, who don't anchor too close, who don't run their generator all night. And now I think that FPB is at the vanguard, explorers and boats that go far and all the rest of it. I mean, there's obviously nothing quite like an FPB, but I think that maybe there are reasonable motorboaters, do you think?
Probably. I mean, we've met a few of them who bought our boats. I mean, as you know, we would never sell a boat to somebody we didn't know, because if you're in our position, when you agree to build a boat for somebody, it's like a marriage. I mean, you're married to these people for 4 or 5 years, and from the day they start work, you start work on their boat until the day they sell it, and you don't want to be married to somebody you don't enjoy. So we try to be careful with that. But the thing that I'm watching all these boats develop, and there's I don't quite know how to explain this, but anybody listening to this podcast should understand that there are always two ways of equipping a boat. You can there's several basic things you have to accomplish. You have to stay warm. You have to stay cool. You have to be able to take a nice hot water shower. You have to make fresh water, and you don't have to run your generator very much. You can do those things very simply, and at relatively low cost with lots of space around the equipment, and it'll last forever with very little maintenance. Or you can do them with complexity and lots of wires and circuits, interconnects, and this thing talking to that thing, and you have all kinds of problems. And the difference between the two is so small. And the problem is that the people that build boats, generally, they don't live with them. If you don't live with it, the boat comes in and you just service it. You don't understand the trade-offs, and it's a battle that everybody has to fight. And if you're an owner, you have to just fight for everything. You have your basic stuff, but don't do anything more than the basics, and do it as simply as possible.
But I think it must be really difficult to be a designer who stays in the office, because you don't
know how to make the trade-offs.
You don't know how to. You're absolutely right. And of course, you're always thinking about how you're going to conclude the project and move on.
Yeah.
And because you don't really know what it is that you've designed, it must be really difficult.
A lot of that, it comes down to your personal experience. Because if you talk about ground tackle, we joke, people always kid us about the size of our anchors. And our general ground tackle rule is, your anchors starting to be large enough when people are laughing at you in the marina. If they're not laughing at you, then it's not big enough. And that's people say, well, that's crazy. And if you look at, like, on Cochise, granted, she was 24 or however many meters she was, 25 meters or something overall.
83 feet.
But we had the anchor, 150 kilo high holding power anchor, and which is a huge anchor for a boat like that. And you say, well, why would you want such a big anchor? Well, that if you look at the anchor is a small part of the total anchoring system. And that 150 kilo anchor, there's probably there's over a ton of mass. If you look at all the chain, the spare anchors, the spare rods, the windlass, the cables, etc., it's a huge amount of weight. And the only part that's doing any work is that little anchor. So whether it's 150 kilos or 300 kilos, as long as you can fit it, it's the bigger is the better. And the bigger the anchor, not only does it get more holding power from its mass, but the flukes go up. So it's not a holding power.
In terms of Windhorse, we'd done the heavy weather, we'd proved the concept, and now we're thinking about the next boat, and it's a 64. Yeah,
so we didn't actually start. We when we got to California with the boat, there were people already wanted us to build one, and we were not ready to get back in the harness. And so it wasn't until about a year after we got back that I finally I felt I had enough. We had enough miles on the boat, and we had a pretty good handle on what we would do if we were going to do a sister ship is one thing, but doing a smaller version, which is what we would want to do for production. That's it's a different.
So why did you decide she had to be smaller?
Well, she's not that much smaller. She's the boat with the bolt-on extension is 69 feet. So although it's we cheat on our length. We don't make the boat longer. We make it shorter tell people shorter than it really is. I just thought that was a more efficient configuration.
And you also went for single engine, didn't you? And wing engine.
Yeah. I thought. Well, I disagree with the wing engine. I think the wing engines are if you weigh all the factors carefully, I think the wing engine will cost you more than if you're going to have a wing engine. Then just go to twin engines. Wing engines make no sense to me at all because they're not really good enough to get you.
I think before, we've talked about it, and you've said that it's the FPB 64 owner's security blanket.
Exactly, but what you have to realize when you put that security blanket on, it's costing you probably 10 or 12 miles a day every day off your average passage run. You say, well, that's nothing, but that might be the difference between getting in before a major storm hits and not.
Because of the separate drivetrain.
Exactly. There's a lot of drag associated with that, and if you're going to use it, you have to periodically use it, turn it on, run the boat under load with it, make sure everything's working fine, and that you know how to maneuver with it, because that's different. I think when you consider all those things, it just makes no sense to me. But I understand. I worry about two engines, so.
No, that's entirely right, and I think they've all got wings now. So you then put that 64 on the drawing board, thinking that actually we can build these powerboats in production now. We're going to go back into the boat business, and all because of Windhorse and her performing as I guess you expected when you had her on the board, the design board.
Her boat speed and fuel burn was once we got the props worked out, was exactly within, as close as you can measure, within a couple points one way or the other. What was really different was the motion, and it was so much better than we expected. I didn't want to do anything until I understood what was going on. We had actually, as insurance, because we were so far out in left field design-wise, what everybody was telling us, we allowed for 1.5 tons of high polar mass lead in throughout the hull. We had a system that would allow us with lead in the ends of the booms to trim the boat, to trim her polar moments, to mitigate different wave states. In the end, we even had the seats in the flying bridge were tanks. You could put a couple tons of salt water up there if you needed to attenuate motion. We didn't use any of it. The boat was so comfortable it wasn't necessary.
So can I ask you, Steve, when you actually put the 64 on the drawing board, and you were on Windhorse, a boat that you were to go on to do over 60,000 nautical miles, how were you and Linda feeling about getting back into the boat business?
Well, what we did was we went through Windhorse, and we felt that when it was all said and done, I mean, Windhorse was the size, the hull shape, the length of which we were very familiar with. I mean, it was a more or less the same length as Beowulf and a couple big motor sailors we built, so it was very comfortable territory for us hydrostatically. And now that we had the mileage on Windhorse, we started looking at it and said, well, as we do all our boats, what would we want if we're going to own this boat? Because originally that was our thought. We would take one of those, get a little bit smaller version, and in the end, somebody ended up coming along and taking Windhorse away from us.
You bought something, yeah. You built something much bigger, yeah. So, but I mean, that's for another chapter.
But what we want. The first thing was, how do we maintain the motion? Well, that's a big part of that motion is where do you live on the boat? Because I mean, you have the motion. If the hull's the hull's always going to move somewhat. The closer you are to the pitch and roll center, the more comfortable you're going to be, which is why the Windhorse and the 64s have the kind of living accommodation they do. When you're going to sea on the 64, if you're in the large aft guest cabin or the owner's suite, you're never more than a few meters from the pitch center of the boat. So going uphill, you can sleep up forward, you can sleep on a slan, you can sleep back aft.
But what I was sort of really asking is that when you proved the boat, you started working on the 64. Were you? Did you think that the FPB would become the fleet, the thing that it did, and did you want to get back into building boats?
No way. We sort of it was almost like a group of people came to us and said, "What do we have to do to get you in to do this?" And I had some chats with the guys at Circa then, who were then running the company, and we did some preliminary stuff. And I said, "We need 4 orders to make it work, and here's a rough budget." And a few weeks later, we had deposit checks for 4 boats.
So, and that's how it came. So, Steve, what we're going to do over the coming weeks, I hope, we're going to have a look at the FPB and some of the. You've done so many things, and build a few chapters around you and Linda and boats and everything else that comes with Dashew Offshore and you guys. And we're going to put them into some chapters because I just love to chat to you, and we thought that might be interesting for other people as well. So, as you know, we've chatted about this a little bit and decided that we didn't want to start at the beginning and end at the end. We wanted to start at a sort of midpoint, and then we can dash about and go forwards and backwards and look at some of the amazing things that you guys have done So thank you so much, and looking forward to chatting to you again soon for another chapter.
Well, we're always happy to talk about boats, too, so call anytime.
Thank you so much.